Hi, folks. We have a lot to discuss again. For the top news, the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine apparently is the best vaccine so far. Effective, safer for old people, easy to distribute, and low cost. For our coronavirus story, mutations of the coronavirus do not appear to make the virus more infectious, which is one more detail that is promising for immunity and vaccines. In technology, trucks that can drive themselves are already on Texas roads. The beginning, I guess, of the end of 2 million truck drivers in the United States. For material stuff, an AI system without human assistance discovers a useful new material, thus expanding human knowledge. This, I think, is a new day. And in terms of space, there's growing interest in the moon resources, but that could cause tension. Who owns what? Nobody knows. And in energy in that, a switch to electric vehicles, could that end the oil era and the coal oil era? We're moving the right way, I think. In biology, can we harness a plant's ability to synthesize medicinal compounds? And for us, is growing your own human steaks using cells from your own flesh akin to cannibalism? And can a one-time injection of stem cells cure diabetes? So that's what we'll talk about today. And so to start it off, Richard, what's this about the AstraZeneca vaccine being the best vaccine so far, effective, safer for us folks, easy to distribute and low cost? What's that?
Now, I think this is really an encouraging story. It's more details on this vaccine that was publicized really over the last week or so. And they have shown that the vaccine is over 90% effective. So it's quite effective. And this is based really on preliminary results from their phase 3 trials. So it means it's getting close to release. This was on 24,000 volunteers, so it was fairly big. And besides the 90% effectiveness, then the vaccine also reduced asymptomatic transmission, which is a big deal because that's the way much of the vaccine is transmitted. And people who have the vaccination who end up having asymptomatic COVID, then there's a much lower transition rate or transmission rate, and that's going to drop the transmission rates for the virus overall, which is a big deal. Also, no one who received this vaccine was hospitalized or experienced serious illness. No one. And it worked across all ages. And as I said last week, it's also going to be dramatically cheaper than the mRNA vaccines. So that's the story. Now, we also have heard on the Moderna mRNA vaccine, they have asked for emergency approval from the FDA. And in the US, it looks like that's going to start to be distributed by Christmas. So real vaccines that are highly effective are getting developed and released, and we're within literally just a few weeks of them becoming available. So maybe the worm is turning.
Any comments?
Do you know anything, Richard, about what's happening for us here in Mexico
No.
as far as the vaccine? I mean,
No. You know, I've
because
heard.
I understand the Russians, we got the Mexico bought vaccines from the Russians.
Right, that's why I've heard that we bought 30 million doses of the vaccine from Russia, and though this was not in the announcements, that means that Mexico will do their phase 3 trials.
I had a couple of comments. This vaccine is going to be like $3 a dose or something, and the mRNA vaccines are going to cost like $50 or $60 a dose.
Yes.
So that's one advantage. The other thing is that they've already signed, you know, it was developed as a nonprofit project by Oxford University. So although it has the AstraZeneca label, the actual R&D was done by Oxford University as a nonprofit enterprise. So it's almost being supplied at cost.
Wonderful.
And the third thing is that they've already signed agreements with global manufacturers in other countries to make it worldwide, whereas the mRNA vaccines are going to be made mainly in the US.
Right.
So there's going to be an issue of distribution and affordability for the rest of the world. So, for example, in India, there is a very large manufacturer of vaccines, the world's largest, in fact, called Serum Institute of India. They've been making TB and other vaccines for more than polio vaccines for the last 75 years. They have signed an agreement to manufacture several 100 million doses of it and distribute it worldwide.
That's wonderful.
So I think it will ultimately be the leader, but it's also a more traditional design from what I understand. It's a traditional virus DNA vaccine, whereas the mRNA vaccines are brand new technology.
Right.
And people are going to be a little more leery to use the newer technology. But I think in America, it will be mostly Pfizer or the AstraZeneca.
But Oxford, like you say, the Oxford vaccine is so much cheaper and easier to distribute that I think that it will have legs in America as well.
Yeah, I suspect it will have legs in Mexico as well because
I hope so.
Yeah, the worldwide supply will be much larger.
That's right now of the ones that I have heard of. That's the one that I want to take.
You know, I don't like to bring politics into this, but this Oxford, where was this? Hold on. The AstraZeneca. That you're saying that that's easier to distribute because, is that because you don't need those refrigerators?
Yes, you don't need, you need just standard refrigerators, not the super cold refrigerators.
Right. Okay. The other ones, now there were, I think, two others, or maybe only one other that our government really pushed, really encouraged. And do you know the name of that? Do you know what I mean? One of them, whatever that one is.
Well, I think
I fear that it's been pushed so fast. I don't know whether I can trust it.
Yeah, that was the Moderna vaccine and the BioNTech and Pfizer vaccine.
Say that again. Moderna.
It's a Boston-based company.
Okay.
And the BioNTech is a German-based company, and they tied up with Pfizer because Pfizer had the cloud to manufacture and distribute it worldwide. So those are the other two vaccines that the government has been pushing. Although the government has not given any aid for the Pfizer vaccine, it was done entirely in Germany. The government was pushing Moderna vaccine.
Okay, all right.
Both of them are equal. All three of them are equally effective. The only thing is the two mRNA vaccines need a lot of very, very very good refrigeration.
Yeah.
It's going to be, and they're all two-dose vaccines.
And you know we haven't planned for that. We probably don't even have syringes organized yet. And I don't trust anyone, but they probably don't have enough syringes.
If we move on to another coronavirus story, apparently mutations of the coronavirus don't appear to make it more infectious. which is one more detail that's really quite promising for immunity and vaccines. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, this is, to me, very encouraging because there had been these early reports that are just episodic evidence around the world of people who had infections and then got infected again. And so they were afraid of the kind of mutations and infections that could just kind of keep going. And what they found here, this is a fairly big study. It was 46,000 people in 99 different countries. And the researchers so far have identified more than 12,000 mutations of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, more than 12,000 mutations. And these kind of viruses, like the SARS virus, mutate all the time, and most of the mutations are neutral. But here they looked at all of these and say they have yet to find any evidence that common mutations are increasing the virus's transmissibility. And they also feel like the technology they have for making vaccines now is so good that if the virus does acquire vaccine escape mechanisms in the future, they are confident that quickly they'll be able to revise one of the vaccines and get that into distribution. So this story continues the reporting that is saying immunity to the virus is better than we had hoped. So maybe the world will reopen one day. Yay!
It's very encouraging with vaccines coming soon. We're talking about weeks, I believe, at the best. Yes. In the meantime, in the United States, the curve of infections is just going through the roof, and the hospitals don't have any more beds. So there's going to be, when the vaccines come, we're also going to be at a point where they will have to turn away people infected at the hospitals in the States.
There still are some treatment modalities that have not finished their phase 3 testing, though, that look like they can prevent the worst of the disease and treat people without hospitalization. And one of them is this, I reported it here a few weeks ago, it's called the ICAM. It's a combination of 4 different kinds of drugs, including a steroid and anti-inflammatory and antiviral and things like vitamin C and D and zinc. So that's also encouraging. I don't know how long it'll be before that testing is done and that kind of process becomes standard. I had a friend in Guadalajara who got coronavirus, and I had given them information about this protocol, and his wife told me that the doctors in Guadalajara prescribed something very similar for him. So the word's getting around.
Any more comments?
Well, I think the only other comment I would make is that the immunity of the vaccine is not known yet, whether it's going to be for 9 months, 1 year, 2 years. That's going to be a big determinant in how fast the world will come back on its feet, because If you need frequent shots like every 6 months or 9 months, that's going to impose additional costs and complications, but we don't know yet.
Last week, there was a story reported that we reported and discussed here saying that what they have found about the non-vaccine immunity was that it is much stronger than they had thought, and they thought it's likely to be solid and to last for years than the kind of natural immunity you build up when you have the infection. And the vaccines still build up some of that same reaction. I don't know if there are any vaccines yet. I haven't read about the vaccines and their T cell development. They said that with the existing patients, one of the things that happens after you have the virus, your immune system learns about it and starts figuring out how to make these killer T cells that will kill the virus in your body. And what they have found out is that even with current patients, you may not see any antibodies in their system, but their T cells still work. And they said the COVID virus, when it attacks the body, it takes a while, a week or more before the symptoms get bad. And this week or more gives your body the time it needs to start making the T cells and protect itself. So that all is encouraging.
Yeah, that is very encouraging, absolutely.
Any more comments? If so, we'll move on to technology. Apparently, trucks that drive themselves are already on Texas. Is this the beginning of the end of 2 million truck drivers in the USA?
The 2 million truck, the information about the 2 million truck drivers was not in the story. That's something that I know is part of the condition. And that's one of the kind of things that we have in the future is a lot of these jobs are going to either go away or change drastically. And so the story here is that it looks like the age of self-driving 18-wheelers traveling on U.S. highways must be closer than people think. And it's already happening in Texas, and North Texas is going to emerge as a likely location for a major hub. And there's one company that is particularly aggressively working to build a nationwide freight network of driverless trucks, picking up freight from where it's imported and then taking it to one of these transit hubs. And this company is called TuSimple, TuSimple. And it has offices in Beijing, of course, and San Diego. And they are now have announced plans to build a giant hub for autonomous trucks in Fort Worth Alliance, Texas development, which is a place that has special rules for transportation companies and great access to the freeway and to the airport. And the trucks use cameras and sensors that provide an enormous amount of data, and the trucks know what is happening ahead of them half a mile. And they can react to emergencies 10 times faster than us crummy humans. And right now, TuMobile is operating their self-driving trucks using a safety operator behind the wheel and a test engineer in the passenger seat to monitor it. but their plans is they're going to begin operating the trucks with no human in the cab next year. Again, there'll be fixed routes, and their kind of transit situation is, I think, perfect for the autonomous drivers because they have a limited number of routes and they're all, well identified. And one of the things about Texas that makes them a leader is that driverless vehicles are already legal in Texas. That happened 3 years ago. And so it makes it a great place to start. And Too Simple is already running self-driving trucks from Arizona to West Texas and will soon extend that to this Fort Worth hub. And they'll have a nationwide network by 2023. And to give you an idea that they have a little backing, one of their major backers is UPS. I wonder why they're interested in autonomous trucking. And transportation is a big deal, bigger than any of us realize, I think. In the US, transportation and logistics is a $1.8 trillion business. So, and they think this Fort Worth area location they think is perfect. They say they have the highways, they have the airport, they have this massive logistics center, and they even have an inland port, I guess, in Fort Worth. I hadn't really heard about it, but I recall there is one, and they say this combination doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. So their plan is to make Texas big. I think Texas likes to be big.
Any comments?
I wonder if this is going to put the freight train out of business.
The freight trains are still a lot cheaper, and they can move traffic with less energy, so that means there still will be cheaper. But it's a good question.
Well, I wonder how insurance companies are looking. So much for no fault. We'll know exactly who caused it.
That's right. Part of the reason
a half hour before it happens.
Texas legalizing the autonomous vehicles, part of their requirement is that the vehicles have a recording system on board. So if there's an accident, they can play the tape and find out what happened.
Sort of like a black box.
Uh-huh.
For an airplane.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Tesla also is getting into the trucking business, I'm told. I've read somewhere in the media.
Who is that?
Tesla.
Oh, yes, Tesla has trucks that are one of the next things that he'll be producing.
Any other comments?
Again, 2 million jobs. If you look at these truck driver, the long haul truck driver jobs, those are one of the areas where somebody without a college degree can still make a good living if they're willing to be away from their home most of the time. And that's another door that is closing for a lot of people.
That's right. I'm surprised Amazon hasn't invested in this technology, because they've invested in drone technology for delivery. But I'm surprised they haven't invested in the self-driving truck.
That we know of. They are building their own fleet of thousands of electric delivery trucks. And they may have heard of the autonomous delivery. Now, the Amazon has a worse problem than these guys do, because Amazon has to deliver anywhere. So you have to have the autonomous trucks that will navigate the bumpy streets in places like Ajijic. And I don't know, maybe going over the cobblestones will jar the test equipment or the sensors out of place.
Okay, moving on to materials. Apparently an AI system without human assistance has discovered a new useful material, thus expanding human knowledge without human assistance. This is the new day. Richard, what's that about?
Well, the first thing is, about it being a new day. We now are at the place where we can have essentially AI scientists that are on their own looking at stuff, running tests, analyzing the data, and then coming up with their scientific findings. And to me, if that is not a big advance in computers, I don't know what is. And so the specifics here, they've developed an AI algorithm that they call Cameo. And right out of the box, Cameo was able to discover a useful new material without requiring additional training or assistance from scientists. So it was on its own. And this, in the material science area, the scientists are trying to discover new materials that can be used in specific applications. And to do it now is an enormous task, because typically to find a new material, you have to look at all the possible materials you would have and then run a bunch of a matrix of different kinds of tests. So maybe there are 5 different things that you test and get 10 values of each of those 5 kinds, and then work the matrix and then do your science after you have that data set. And this is where Cameo really comes in and does a good job. Cameo is short for, its full name is Closed Loop Autonomous System for Materials Exploration and Optimization. I can see why they gave it a short name. And what Cameo does is it's programmed with all the science knowledge that we have, so you don't have to train it anything. It already knows all the science. And then within its database of thousands of materials, it already has some data to work with. And because it has this background in data, then it is able to, on its own, when you give it a task, it figures out what might be a useful candidate. One of the things that it knows about is the atomic structure and the patterns of the atoms, because that makes a lot of difference in the hardness of material and things like that. And that's all part of its data too. And then it can order up tests. So it is like a closed loop system where it determines what experiments it needs to run on what material to be able to get the data that it doesn't have, coordinates with other systems to do the material, and then collects the data. And that's all stuff that a scientist would do, but it, because of the algorithm, it does not need as many data points, so you can do it faster, and you can do it with quickly hone in on the best material. And let me give you an example of it here that they talked about. This unsupervised AI was given problem to discover a new potential material that would be good for something like making recording information in CDs. And so it was given 177 materials to investigate. And then it performed, looked at the data, and it performed 19 different experimental cycles, which took 10 hours. And if a human had done this with the kind of experimental cycles that they usually do, it would have taken humans 10 times longer just to collect the data. And then at the end, it identified a candidate not only was good, but the candidate, the material is twice as good as the stuff that is presently being used. What they were after was a material that is, they call a phase change material, where it changes atomic structure from crystalline to amorphous when you hit it with a little heat. And that is the kind of material that they use to record data in optical CDs. An optical CD works by records data basically by hitting a particle with a laser, which heats it up and changes its property. And the material they found is twice as good as anything that is on the market. And here is a AI device expanding our knowledge without anybody helping it. And the first time out of the box, it discovered something twice as good as anything we have. So good work, Cameo.
Any comments?
Scientists are going to be unemployed. Many scientists are going to lose their job, right? Because run with AI.
I don't think the scientists will lose their jobs. They will just get to worry about science instead of running all those tests. They get to think instead of being a technician.
Good point.
Any comments? Okay, then moving along to space and the moon. Apparently there's a lot of interest in the resources on the moon. And will this cause tensions? Who owns what? Nobody apparently knows. Richard.
Well, looks like the moon is going to cause trouble. There are now many different countries and various commercial ventures that have plans to have missions to the moon in the next 5 years. And all of these missions are looking for locations on the moon where they can mine minerals and other materials. And the problem with the moon is, even though there's this growing interest in extractable resources, there are not enough to go around. And there are no international policies or agreements to decide who owns what from where. And so this, the scientists are concerned that this is going to cause trouble. I don't know why they would think that. And, you know, there is no law to regulate who gets to use the resources, and there's a lot of competition for the resources. And it turns out on the moon, we're hearing things about their discoveries, but there are not, that we know of, very many places that have resources of interest, and those places are very small. So it's just the perfect thing for competition and for struggling. On the moon, particularly, water and iron are important because they are the resources that you need to have further missions on the moon and in space. Iron is important if you want to build anything. Uh, if you have to send the iron up from Earth, the cost per pound is enormous. And so it's a lot cheaper to mine the iron and refine it on the moon. The other thing that is particularly of interest is water. You need water to survive. And again, it's enormously expensive to put it up from Earth. And there are some treaties already, but the treaties are weak and really do not deal with this. And, they think maybe there is a framework for solutions that come from current common pool resources on the earth, like the high seas or some fish stocks or things like this. We have on the earth kind of tried to figure out some ways to cooperate about a few things. And do you think we'll be smart enough to do that for the moon, or is it going to be a free-for-all? Hoo-hoo, tune in, and we'll see.
Any comment?
Keep the conflicts up in the moon, any wars only on the moon. They should agree on that. Then we're safe here.
Anything else?
The only other comment I would make is there is an analogous situation in the Arctic Ocean. Yeah. Because as the Arctic ice is melting because of climate change, Russia, China, the US, Norway, a lot of countries are rushing in and claiming vast extents of the Arctic Sea as their own. And there isn't a formal treaty or any kind of thing. I heard the Russian submarines have been planting Russian flags on the ocean floor in many places. So I think this could be a good precursor to what will happen on the moon.
Now, the problem with the war on the moon, as I recall my science fiction stories, is that somebody's on the moon has a big advantage over people on the Earth if you're in warfare, because on the moon, you can use a mass driver, kind of a high-tech catapult, to throw rocks into space at the Earth. And you can do it with enough precision where you can, if you want to throw a rock on China, you can do it. So it'll be a problem.
Any other comments? Okay, then, Richard, on the environment, will a switch to electric vehicles end the fossil fuel era of oil and coal? Are we moving in the right direction? What's that about?
Well, the end is coming. Thank goodness for the end. And it is, they look as more and more nations, particularly China and India, try to grow their countries and their economies. They are both will go heavily into electronic vehicles. And as they do this, they're going to reduce their reliance on imported oil. It turns out China spends 1.5% of their GDP on imported oil. India spends almost twice that. So the oil expenditures are enormous, and they think particularly as India and China go electric, they're going to slash the expected growth in oil demand by about 2/3. So it's going to be an enormous piece of demand that goes out of the oil business. And this change is significant enough that they say now if you factor in the war on plastics that's also causing trouble for the oil companies, and you factor this with the penetration of electric vehicles, then they think that 2019 will turn out to be the year for peak oil. They're saying, they're forecasting that the peak oil is already behind us. Yay for the end of peak oil. That's one of the things that's going to save our pretty planet.
Any comment?
There's so many advantages to that, Richard, because when you think about the environment, the cleaner air, the cost of the illnesses that is caused by the pollution, and just having a clean environment and the climate change, you know, that if we can control that, we have at least a chance. So I think it's very, very important.
Yes.
Other thoughts?
The only other thought I would make is that having worked in the energy business for 40 years, without nuclear in the equation, clean energy is probably not achievable. China is the only one that has recognized that, and they're building about 50 nuclear plants. They're building about 10 a year. About 5,000 or more than that, about 10,000 megawatts of electricity is nuclear in China. Each year they're adding that much over the next 20 years. Which is making all their neighbors very nervous, but the Chinese are going headstrong and building 10 plus nuclear plants a year.
Yes.
They're the only ones who will probably achieve climate goals in the long term, because between, they have a lot of land mass, so they have a lot of room for windmills and solar panels. And then they're augmenting that with nuclear. I think they are very likely to achieve their goals. I think most of the countries are really floundering at the moment.
But
no, I disagree, because there are countries in Europe that are almost totally green. There's parts of Denmark that uses only renewable energy. This actually is happening now, and they're building more and more windmills and solar cells and so on. So they're moving ahead.
You know, the thing though is there are 50 nuclear plants in France that are part of the Euro grid, and they are the backbone of that. So if there are fluctuations or failures of renewables in Germany or Sweden or Denmark, the European grid is supplying it from the French nuclear plants. You know, that's a huge player.
No, because they have a treaty. Germany sends energy to Scandinavia when the wind is not strong enough for the windmills. So they have this exchange of energy. The wind factors and other things are different throughout Europe. You know, that is actually working quite well right now, and they are very, very ambitious as to new goals, and they have agreements, the Paris Agreement, among other things, to reduce the amount of exhaust from any vehicle, anything. So I think they're well on their way.
Yeah, I know, but I think the insurance policy there is the 50 nuclear plants in France. They're part of that same system.
I'm sure they are, because everybody is helping everybody. But Denmark has no nuclear plants. As a matter of fact, many years ago, they said, we're not going to have any on Danish territory. And Sweden closed a big nuclear plant.
And so did Germany.
Yeah.
And so anyway, this is an interesting point that you bring out, VJ, which is the dependency we still have in places on nuclear energy, and nuclear energy is certainly one of the ones that is kind of had a lot of bad press. You know, Chernobyl and Fukushima and stuff like that kind of make it seem not so appealing. One of the things I wonder about is not nuclear, but fusion. It looks like we are 4 or 5 years away now from being able to have a real effective demonstration of fusion power using the latest magnetic technology and stuff like that. And that will change the game, and fusion is going to be less of a problem child than the nuclear, because its byproducts don't have this terrible long life.
Yay.
Anyway, we'll see. That's a great point. Thank you.
Yeah. Moving along, we know about plants being able to synthesize things. Now, can we use that ability to be able to synthesize medicinal compounds? What's that about?
Well, and the quick answer is it sure looks like it. And the specific case that they are looking at, there is a class of compounds called anthraquinones, and they are naturally occurring compounds in plants that are prized for their medicinal properties, as well as making ecologically friendly dyes. And they, for a long time, they haven't understood what the plants did to be able to make these chemicals. And recently, then they discovered the plant-based mechanism for generating these chemicals. And having understood that, they know now what the enzyme is that creates this medicinal compound in the plant. And now that they have, they say, we've established the first step on the ladder, so we can move quickly to elucidate the full suite of genes involved in the synthesis of anthraquinone. And once they do that, they will be able to, and again, this is modern science, re-engineer plants to be able to make this compound in high concentration so it's easy to harvest. So they think this same technique will be able to help improve the yields in agriculture and biofuel crops, etc. But this is an example of the beginning of the kind of engineering that we are able to do on plants to use plants as a much higher resource, if only there's any place on Earth left to grow them.
Any thoughts? Well then, moving along, Richard, are you prepared to scrape a little bit of skin off your arm and using that, growing your own steak, using your cells? And is that akin to cannibalism?
This, one of the things that's interesting to me about science is that it presents new kind of ethical problems to people. However, this particular ethical problem, you've heard me talk about cell-grown meat, and this version of it is something that never occurred to me. And it, they say you are what you eat. This soon may become a lot more literal. And a London-based design museum gave their Design of the Year award to a do-it-yourself meal kit for growing steaks from human cells. And this product, the steak, is called the Oribos steak. after the circular symbol of a snake eating itself tail first. Now this kit, it was at an art show, so this kit turns out to be hypothetical rather than something you can buy from Amazon. But it would come with everything you need to be able to use your own cells to grow miniature human meat steaks. And one of the designers says, quote, "People think that eating oneself is cannibalism, which technically this is not. I'm not sure about that." And they say growing yourself ensures that you and your loved ones always know the origin of your food and how it's been raised, and that no cells were acquired, that all the cells were acquired ethically and consensually. And it turns out that growing an Oribus steak would take about 3 months using cells taken from inside your cheek. Now, one other issue is so far lab-grown meat has not been approved for human consumptions, though they're planning to hit the shelves in the next few years. And I have no idea what the FDA is going to say about growing human steaks. Would you eat one?
Not appetizing.
Now, come on, we must have some fans of human steaks. There's some
sort of like a leg of Mary Ellen.
That's right. Yeah.
All right.
One of the upsides is it says it takes 3 months to do it, to grow one, right? Okay, that's probably about as often as you ought to have some good red meat, right, for your diet. So
okay, but you know, is human flesh red meat? I heard the cannibals called humans long pig because our meat is white meat, not red meat.
The other white, well, it depends upon which humans you're talking about, of course.
But all the meat is the same regardless of the pigment of the skin.
Right.
No.
So that's the other white meat besides chicken and pork or whatever.
Well, you know, I was listening to Science Friday last weekend, and they were talking about creating new foods that are like fish and meat, but made from vegetarian products. They look, I mean, they're already there in the US in the hamburger market, where Burger King is selling the almost beef vegetarian burger, which tastes exactly like meat. And there was one scientist who was developing similar things for seafood. You know, they take soybeans and they end up making it taste like tuna. So, and with the same nutritional values. So, you know, these are going to raise a lot of interesting food choices in the future. And they will probably be more ethical than the having a steak made from your own body cells.
Well, one of the things I wonder about on a serious side with this is I have chronic kidney disease, and so I'm supposed to watch phosphorus and potassium, and so soybeans and soybean products are one of the things that I cannot have at all because of the phosphorus and potassium. What I don't know, for example, about the Burger King product, I believe that's made from the roots of the soybean plant, and I haven't seen anything about that in terms of the phosphorus potassium content. But because of my dietary restrictions, a lot of the stuff that is from soybean, for example, I don't think I can use.
I see.
Any other comments? Well then, for our final one, could a one-time injection of stem cells cure diabetes? What's that?
Well, this is another story that is really encouraging. And, you know, the Canadians have actually helped us a lot with insulin. Insulin was discovered first by scientists at the University of Toronto, and here now scientists at the University of Alberta have, they think they are onto something, that what they have is a one-time injection of insulin-producing cells derived from human stem cells, and that this is enough to get your insulin production up, and so you won't have diabetes. And since you're using human stem cells to begin with, there's no risk of immunosuppressants or the other trouble you get in from organ transplants. And so this is a one-shot stem cell treatment to cure diabetics forever.
Nice.
Any comments?
Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Yeah, I think it would be revolutionary.
Yes, and there are many people who have that as an issue, and it contributes to other things, like, for example, COVID susceptibility and COVID damage. And there are millions and millions of diabetics. And, you know, I'm basically was a diabetic treating myself with insulin. I made diet changes, and now this year I haven't needed any insulin, but it's always there in the background as a problem, and it would be nice just to have it go away.
Richard, when we talk about curing diabetes, isn't this mainly type 1 diabetes? Because with type 2 diabetes, you produce your own insulin. It's just that your body wants to, doesn't absorb it as well. Any thoughts on that?
I think it certainly is a big thing for type 1 diabetes where you're not producing insulin. It looks like it'll also be good for type 2 diabetes because it will let you turn your insulin production rate up. So if you're not producing enough, one solution is to make more. And this is a way to make more.
What stage is this at? I mean, how far away?
This is early. This is the first announcement of research. So there haven't been anything other than, you know, small experiments done yet. So it's going to be a kind of thing. The typical cycle from here is, if they're going fast, is still a couple of years.
Right. Yeah. At least. Yeah.
Right.
Very promising.
Nice.
Now, also, I hope that you guys appreciate how much of this current COVID news you're getting in these sessions, because you are among the most up-to-date people in the world just because you come to Hot Science. The only trouble I have is that YouTube has a very tough policy on misinformation about COVID treatments. And when I gave the story a few weeks ago about the ICAM treatment, YouTube made me take it out of the video, and they warned me that if I had another violation of what they call community standards, that they would throw me off YouTube for a while. So I have to be very careful while I try to give you the latest information, not to give you information on treatments that has not been approved by the WHO.
But it looks like they apply a different standard to Donald J. Trump.
That's right. That's right. They'll throw me off, but not Trump.
Any other thoughts? Well then, Richard, thank you so much. And thank you for everybody for participating, and we'll see you in a week's time.
Thank you, Richard and Fred.
Good to see you.
Nice articles, Rich. Nice articles.
Thank
Folks,
you.
take care. Be careful down there.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Adios. Okay. See you, Arden. Johannes.
Yes.
See you next week. Yes.
Yeah. If you have 30 seconds,
yes, sir.
I just want to say several weeks ago, you spoke, there was an article about that we are at an inflection point. Remember that? You mentioned that with the virus and everything going on now, that the world would look different after we get over this.
Yes.
And I've given a lot of thought to that, and it was very interesting. I mean, I agree that we are, so you're starting a lot of thoughts too, which is appreciated. That's all I want to say.
Okay, well, good. I hope you find some hope in that. I do think, things are going to be different coming out than they were going in. One of the reasons is also, like with the electric vehicles, this COVID virus is happening at the same time that a bunch of other things that are happening. And I think it lets us do kind of a reset. It's interesting that in the automotive area, that all of the internal combustion car manufacturers are having terrible trouble this year of COVID, but Tesla is setting records for its sales everywhere in the world.
I read, Richard, that GM is going to go over to producing a whole range of electrical vehicles.
Absolutely. GM is going to be bigger than you think. And one of the stories I had about the autonomous cabs tests in San Francisco, the company that was behind that was General Motors. And that shows what they're doing. Also, the company that is essentially half owner of this Chinese company that is offering the $5,000 four-seater electric vehicle, is half owned by GM.
Not surprising. And I don't know if I mentioned, I drive a Nissan Tesla, total electric vehicle. I just plug it in at night, and next morning I got 90 to 100 miles of range.
Right. So you're more advanced than the rest of us.
Just my dream for many years. Being an electrical engineer, I always wanted a electric.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay. See you next week, Johannes and Arden. Okay.